PBR Monday, number 10 of 2021. I noticed there's an awful lot of people that have said they're going to be here despite the fact that it's Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day to everybody. I sure hope that you had a good time out doing whatever you were doing today. I saw that at least a couple of people were out, according to their social media feeds, preparing for the Tour of Idaho. There was a guy that was riding day one today. There were some other people that were out doing various rides to test out pieces of equipment stuff, and that's all awesome. This is the time of year to start getting on it because it's getting real. In about 6 weeks, the flag's going to drop and the first teams are off. So probably the first thing we should talk about tonight is the deadline, which is coming up tomorrow, which is if you intend to do a Tour of Idaho in 2021, I need your team name and the members of all your team in the place on the forum, the declaration thread that's set up especially for that, by tomorrow night at midnight. I'm going to let it go all day, June 1st. Okay, so I'll give you all day tomorrow to do it. But Wednesday morning, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to be looking at that at the forum, and that's when I'm going to start making the calendar. As I told you before, if there's something that's missing, if I can't find all of your team members in the Facebook page and in the forum, I'll send you an email and say, look, you got to get this stuff straightened out. You got 24 hours to do it. But after 24 hours, I got no sense of humor about that. We've been talking about this for months. For some of you, we've been talking about this for a year. And, it is what it is. So get to that forum. Make sure that in the declaration thread, you have the names of all of the people that are on your team. Make sure they're in the Facebook page. They've read the directions so they can get registered there. It's a test. If you can't figure out how to get registered in the Facebook forum and in the Tour of Idaho, on the Motorcycle Jazz forum, you probably can't read enough to do the Tour of Idaho either, because you got to be able to read. Reading is fundamental. It's kind of an inside joke that we have. But get all that stuff done. Don't worry about naming your team. I do all that. I may ask you a few questions that'll help me come up with a team name. By the end of the week, I'm going to have a complete calendar out. Now, people ask all the time, and several of you have asked, I'm not sure about the date yet. That's okay. Just put a date in there. If you need to change it, you can change it. I think I'll have to go back and look at the page, but I think you can change it up till July 15th. I'll have to check. And then after that, you can change it too, but we'll just have to talk about it. Another question that keeps coming up is, well, I'd like to change my date, but I see another team starting out on the day I want to start out on. That doesn't matter. You can start out on the same day as another team. You just can't interact with another team in a way that benefits you. You can run into each other in the trail and stuff like that, but if you got a flat tire and they stop and give you a patch kit, that's against the rules. So it's perfectly fine to be on the trail the same day as another team. That happens all the time. Is the tour is getting more and more popular? There's less than 60 days to do the tour. And this year, there's probably going to be 30 or 40 teams. So there's going to be days when there are multiple teams starting. Last year, I think we had 3 teams on one day, was the busiest day. There's also all the unofficial people, the T2 people. You're going to run across some of them out there. So don't worry about that. You schedule your tour when you want to. The only caveat is I would not be anywhere near Chalice anytime in that Braun Brothers reunion window. You may think that you have a room booked there, but when you get there, that room may not be available. They can book those rooms for a week during Braun Brothers reunion. Why should they book to you for just one night? So please make sure that you pay attention to that. There are teams that are driving or riding their motorcycles an extraordinary distance away from Chalice because they ignored the warnings, or that was the only time they could do it, and they're trying to stay in Chalice during Braun Brothers reunion. That 3 days is no bueno, and really the day before is no bueno either. It's going to cause you some trouble. I have been out in the desert riding, and I've got all of the routes that I'm going to be giving out mapped. And I've got about a dozen different routes out through the desert in this little 40 or 50 mile section from the end of the farm fields north up to Big Southern Butte. So far, every one of them that I've seen, the route itself is actually on the base map in my Trail Tech Voyager Pro. I'm going to do a whole episode probably as soon as I'm done with talking about the individual days, a couple more weeks. We'll do day 9 and day 10 together, so that'll be pretty easy. But So in a couple weeks, I'm going to do a whole episode of navigation. I'm going to bring in a Voyager Pro, and I'm going to talk about how to use it, how to do the updates, how to set it up for the tour of Idaho. Talk a little bit about how to use your 2 GPSs, hopefully, that you're using. One zoomed in, one zoomed out. I'll show you how to upload they have all of the Idaho trails, all the motorcycle trails on the Trail Tech website. You can upload all that stuff. They have excellent base maps. The base map that is in my Voyager Pro is just fine. And again, all these little obscure goat trails I'm using out in the desert, I'm seeing most of those on the base map that's on my Trail Tech Voyager Pro. All right, well, we're going to talk day 8 tonight. And day 8 is an interesting day. As far as I'm concerned, there are 2 difficult days on the Tour of Idaho, day 1 and day 8. A lot of people would say day 2, but day 2's gotten easier over the years. Day 2 used to be a real beater. But we lost about 30 miles of trail, which has slowed a lot of people down. And I think now day 2 is not, it's a long day. And you got to pay attention out in the desert because when it's hot out there. But most people just consider day 2 kind of a long grind, but there's nothing really that technical on it anymore. There used to be some really technical stuff in the sand that wore people out, and it was hot. So most people, I think, agree with me that day 1 is hard just because it's the first day and it's just long. You're going to be on the trail a long time, and it just keeps coming at you. There's nothing super technical or overly technical about day 1, as long as you stay out of the challenge section. But there's enough there that it makes the riding continuously interesting. Navigation is a little bit of an issue in some of those trails. They're not well defined in a couple spots, so you may have to look around. People get lost. I mean, it's a long day. You're going to be on your motorcycle a long time. Strong riders get started about 4 or 5 in the morning, and they're showing up here at the flagpole at sometime between 6 and 9 at night. That's typically what I see, depending on whether you're doing the 1, 2, or 3 team version. The solo variant is not that bad. The 2-team variant is a mega step up, and the 3-team variant is really going to put you in Pocatello Lake. There's a lot of extra riding. It's not hard, but it's just extra distance. But day 8, even though technically I don't think it's any harder than day 1, it is mentally much more difficult because it's deep into the tour. You're beat to death, and it has a feeling about it of isolation that I've never experienced on a motorcycle before. I've experienced it in the mountains, but never, ever on a motorcycle. When I'm doing day 8, it works on me mentally because you get way the heck back into the woods there. You're not seeing anybody else, and it's a different character of woods than you've ridden before. Most of the tour up to Lowell, when you're riding through the trees and stuff, they're big, mature trees, and there's a lot of open spaces. Once you get from Lowell north, all of a sudden, you're in these woods where there's these incredible ferns everywhere. There's a lot of undergrowth. You can't see anything. And you get to some of these trails and you can't see 5 feet in front of you. You look down, you can't see your front fender. And you ride through that stuff for the better part of 175 miles. It is a long freaking way. Lots of technical trails. And if you do the challenge section, I think it's one of the more difficult CSs. I know there's one team that posted a video that said, yeah, we did it. We didn't have to gird our loins. That's horse shit. That was a 3-person team, and I guarantee you they grunted their bikes up some of that stuff. I don't care what they said. And it's because I talk to strong riders all the time that tell me that, yeah, that's as hard as you say it is. You're riding it in the wrong direction. You're going up. If you're coming down it, it's not too bad at all. And if you have 3 people, when you get to the hard parts, you can have quite a bit of help if you need to. But if you go up there as a soloist, I would stay out of that. In a 2-person team, it's going to give you all you want. It does cut off a considerable amount of mileage, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. But before we get too far into this, I have with me a guest tonight that I want to bring in. Let me unmute the microphone here. A real good friend of mine, Tour of Idaho veteran, Aaron Stafford, one of my favorite guys. Aaron does a lot of mountaineering these days, and he and I were talking before I came on. Our lives are kind of going in opposite directions because he's just getting into it. He's doing some incredibly bold stuff early on, which I have a lot of respect for. Salute. But he's also a Tour of Idaho vet. These guys have one of the most compelling Tour of Idaho stories I ever heard in my life. It's an awesome tale. And a lot of it happened on day 8. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. Tell me about your day 8 adventures on the Tour of Idaho.
Well, thanks, Martin. That was awfully kind of you. You got some pretty awesome mountaineering stuff, and much more bold than anything I'm going to do. But yeah, so
Don't count on it.
hey, so yeah, we got into, well, back then we were 9 days, so it was our day 7. So it's kind of weird for me to talk about D8.
Yeah.
But day 7, we started out low and got rolling, and we were having a great day. And we, probably most people don't know this, we actually rode in September. I think we were the second week of September. So we were really late that year. It's kind of what worked for us, so we did it. And I went with my older brother Don. He was kind of the instigator of the whole thing and got me into it. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So we got into what would be day 8 in Lowell, and we had actually pretty incredible weather the entire trip. And we had not made a decision if we were going to go up Sherman Creek or we were going to go the long way. And we dropped off the ridge. I'd have to look back at the map. It's been a few years, but I remember we dropped off the ridge down that trail and across the creek, and we sat there and we were like, okay, which way are we going? And the decision was, well, yeah, Sherman Creek looks pretty brutal. A lot of guys have done it. Let's go the long route. And right then I opened my mouth and I said, Don, we have just nailed the weather. We're just, we have licked this thing on the weather department, and we really had great weather. And we started up that creek, and it gets a little exposure there along the creek and whatnot. And it's that trail has got some brush on it.
Fish Creek.
Yeah, what, Fish Creek?
Fish Creek.
Yep. So Fish Creek, we started going to Fish Creek, and it reminds us a lot of Western Washington. There's a lot of vegetation. It's probably the most vegetation I've seen in Idaho, and you're very remote at that point. And I said, earlier, I said, wow, we really licked the weather. Well, sure enough, here comes this big old cloud, and it starts pouring and pouring. And so we had rain jackets and Gore-Tex pants. We slid those on. Don went first, and we slogged through that brush for a couple hours up the ridge, made it up toward Lowell Motorway, and we were soaked. And it was starting to snow up on top. And Don going first took most of the water. I had a pretty easy second. And so he's like, well, I'm in bad shape. We got to stop, build a fire, reassess, do something. So we get up the top of the ridge. There's this great big Army canvas tent. A couple pickups parked out front. We said, oh, sweet. So tent parts, a couple guys, come on in here. It's Idaho. Everybody's there to help each other. So we go in this tent, and there's, I don't know the exact number, but it seemed like about 15 guys in this tent. It was dark. There was 2 Camp Chef stoves, no fireplace. And for some reason, these guys were all wearing the same color sweatshirt, red sweatshirts. They're like, wonder why they're all wearing the same sweatshirt. We're miserable and cold, and we're stripped down. We're pretty much in our underwear at this point, right? And so the guys are they got some big eyes, and we're asking them questions. They're asking us questions. And finally one of them goes, we're prisoners from the Orofino prison on work assignment out here clearing brush, don't you? And so here we are, damn near buck naked in their tent, 15 inmates, and they're just looking at us like, what the hell are you guys doing? And so we're trying to dry our gear off on these chef stoves, right? And it's borderline snowing out there. And those guys left for a few minutes and came back. They went up the Lowell Motorway to check it out and came back down. And we had actually messaged Martin and said, hey, I don't know, man, this is not what we've been doing. We're not prepared for this. And we were really cold, and it was ugly, and it was raining, and we were messaging back and forth a little bit. And he says, well, give it a few minutes and try it. And we had pretty much decided we were done, that we weren't going to be able to push on. And we talked to these guys in this Army tent for about 2 hours, and sharing life stories and hearing what these guys had done, what they'd been through. And it was actually a pretty interesting conversation. It was for the good. I think we provided them with a few good things, and they told us what not to do in life, and we kind of agreed to that. But we went out of the tent, and we were fully prepared we were pretty bummed. We're like, I don't know, man, we're in bad shape. And we went out of the tent. The sun came out. The clouds parted. The rain and snow was gone. And we're like, what the hell? Let's go. So we jumped on our bikes, cruised up Lolo Motorway, got down, headed towards Scurvy, and it's brush again. And this time I said, Don, you did your part. I'm going first. And it was so damn wet. I've never been that wet, even swimming in my life, going through that brush. And up to Scurvy, we got up to Scurvy about the time sunset, and we were in bad shape. It was cold, really cold. And then we had to ride back to Locksaw, which, always feels like 15 minutes, but it's a good 2 hours.
Yep.
And that was pretty defining. 34 degrees, cruising on a logging road for 2 hours and sopping wet. But, that's the thing about this thing, is you're in Arco on day 2, thinking you're never going to cool down again ever in your life. And we actually had it pretty cool when we went through. There was only in the 90s, but you get out above Lowell and up in there, and that's a different ball game. That's a whole different set of terrain, and you're far away from everything. So
there's a couple things I want to go back over here, because I try to tell people they don't want to listen. And you said something a while ago that I think is key. What were you guys wearing for outer garments and all this?
So for outer garments, Gore-Tex.
Gore-Tex, thank you. So you're a climber, so you know this. Gore-Tex almost always works in climbing, right? Because you're not brushing against stuff all the time.
You're not getting.
So when you're climbing Rainier or you're climbing some peak in the Northwest, it could be raining like buckets. And if you're in Gore-Tex, you're going to say nice and warm and dry and toasty until you start trying to climb a jam crack or something in it. Then it'll wick through the material. But when you're on the tour of Idaho and you're riding through all those bushes and stuff, and those wet leaves and wet limbs and stuff keep hitting you, that Gore-Tex is like a sieve. You said it. You said you were wetter than you'd ever been swimming before. Gore-Tex is worthless for that type of riding. You are much better off stopping somewhere, buying the 100% waterproof rubberized rain gear that they sell in every country store on the planet. And it's disposable. You're going to spend $20 for it. That'll keep you drier than that $300 Gore-Tex outfit in those type of conditions. Gore-Tex was not designed to do stuff like that. Gore-Tex was designed with mountaineers and backpackers and people like that in mind. It wasn't designed for guys that are going to be riding 30 miles an hour, getting tree limb slaps for 100 miles. It won't do that. You will wick the moisture through those Gore-Tex garments, I guarantee it. And you have never seen undergrowth like you're going to see going up to Scurvy Mountain. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I live in the Northwest, lived here my whole life, and it's wet here and brushy here. But that, I've logged, I've done all sorts of stuff, and that is brushy. Very brushy.
So Aaron and Don are two of the toughest guys I know. And, I was super stoked when they finished it. This story, again, I like to bring these people on to tell their own stories because, you don't want to listen to Jimmy. You don't want to listen to me. You don't want to listen to Carrie and people like that. The more people we bring on, everybody's going to tell you the same thing. We ran into things that were bigger than us, and we had to figure some things out on the spot. Oh, and by the way, all the stuff that people were trying to tell us was basically for our own good. It wasn't like people were trying to talk down to us. They were trying to tell us, look, this is something that's different and it's unique, and you need to think a little bit outside of the box. But that prison gang, the photograph that we had on the calendar that year that you guys gave me, which I think will probably be in next year's calendar again, with your permission, that was the most awesome photo I have seen on the tour of Idaho. These two guys up there surrounded by all these guys in prison outfits. It's Cool Hand Luke on the tour of Idaho.
The title of that should be, if you ever get on top of a mountain with a bunch of prison inmates, go in, strip down, and 2 hours. I guarantee it'll change your life.
The coldest I have ever been is in the same spot you were. The year that I rode with Jimmy and we filmed him, I decided to try to ride a lot of the tour backward to come back just because, we don't do it that way. And I thought it would be fun to just ride back as far as I could to Pocatello. So I did most of what's now day 10 backward. And then I did what's now day 9 backward and got into day 8 backward. And it started doing exactly what you were talking about. It starts out as rain. anytime in late August or September, Jeff Jensen ran the same thing last year. You start out, it's a nice day, clouds come rolling over, and before you know it, it's 30 degrees and graupel and sleet and stuff are falling on you. It'll turn to snow at high altitudes. So I'm riding through this stuff, and the next thing I know, in about 15 minutes, 4 inches of snow appeared on the trail in front of me. It was up there in that state line trail area. In all the years I spent mountaineering, I have never been as cold in my life as I was then, because I wasn't expecting any rain, so I didn't have any real rain gear with me. I just had my normal Gore-Tex Climb stuff. Climb makes the best Gore-Tex stuff there is, but it was just useless. And I was pretty soon soaked to the skin, and by the time I got to Lowell, because I rode like parts of day 9 and day 8 together. By the time I got to Lowell, I was in full-blown hypothermia. And there were a couple of times when I got off the bike and revved the throttle up and hugged the engine. And you know, had my hands like a quarter of an inch away from the headers, just trying to get enough flexion back in my fingers so I could control throttles and clutches and stuff. It's incredible how the heat and the cold can both kick your butt on the tour. And sometimes in the same day.
And piece of advice, don't ever say how great the weather's been. It was less than an hour. Less than an hour. Just crazy.
We
rolled in there to Locksaw, and it was pitch black. And, you know, they were still serving dinner. And, you know, I don't know what we looked like, but they just parted tables, and we went over to that great big fireplace and shivered. And they were looking at us like, holy hell, where did you guys come from?
Who was the team a couple years ago that spent the night in the bathroom? There's a really nice heater in that bathroom that's there. And somebody posted photos. They got there, their room was locked, and there wasn't anybody around to let them in. Normally, they'll leave the room unlocked, and they'll leave the key someplace hidden. But there was somebody that got there, and it might have even been Brett Asper. And he ended up staying in the bathroom all night long. They've got like a nice heater in the bathroom, and he just cuddled up to the heater.
We talked.
All right, man.
We talked that gal into firing up her big industrial dryer. We threw all our gear in there, and that was our saving grace.
Got anything else you want to tell everybody? You've been real generous with your time, and I appreciate you coming on the holiday weekend.
Yeah, actually, I do. You know, if you're seriously about doing the tour of Idaho, and I'm not just saying this because Martin invited me on here, but I've been saying this on the forum and Facebook since I've done it. But listen to what he's got to say. He's not just throwing the stuff on here for no reason. Like those are the ingredients for success. Listen to it, study it. Don't come unprepared, and don't be all pissed off when you didn't do the things you should have done. It's nobody's fault but your own. And you know, luck has a lot to do with this tour of Idaho. And you know, it just do your best and have a good time with it. Don't be too frustrated. Relax and have a good time, because we're all watching. We're all cheering you on. Nobody's trying to hope you fail. And I know sometimes people kind of come across like thinking that we're wanting you to fail, but no, like we pulled it off. You can too, you know. And you know, it's one of the greatest experiences of your life when you do it, no matter what happens.
We razz each other all the time in here. There's a lot of good nature razzing and stuff. But when push comes to shove, everybody is pulling for your success. And I'll throw this right back at you. A couple of years ago, we had a rider, Jeff Jensen, took an unexpected 900-foot detour down off a side hill.
Yeah.
And I started calling around on the phone. We've got a big sort of a private group. And I said, okay, Jensen's down this lake. I don't think he can ride out the trail that goes out from the lake. It's a pretty brutal trail. It might take him days to get out. He's going to end up walking in motorcycle boots to get out. If he can't winch his bike back up this hill, would be an incredible feat, we're going to have to go get him. So you guys were two of the closest, and I think we had Dwayne Coulter said he would show up, but you guys were loading up trucks. There were people that lived 600 miles away from where Jeff was, and they're all saying, yeah, I can't get there right now, but as soon as I get off work, I'll go home, I'll throw stuff in the truck, and we'll all meet in this little town, and we'll all go out together with headlights at night, and we'll find a guy. That's the kind of support you get on this thing. If we determine that, you know, you're pretty far into the tour, you're in trouble. If it's not me, there's somebody that's in this group that's going to be coming down that trail to look for you. our buddy Dan Hoheim, he's come in there an awful lot and helped people out that have gotten stuck up in that area, which is one of the more remote areas. So I want to thank you publicly for that. I really appreciate you guys offering to come in and help us out, because you don't live particularly close to where he was. It would have been the same drive for you as for me, about 600 miles.
No, but it's a brotherhood, right? Like, we're all in this together, and this is fun, and the tour of Idaho is very unique, and it's an opportunity of a lifetime to be able to do it. And life's too short to be an asshat and we're all in it together. Let's have a good time. There's some competition here and there, but a guy like Jeff Jensen, you don't find a better individual.
Nah, he's a super good dude. So
You know,
you mean it's not our fault if you cannot only not make it from the border to Pocatello in a day, or all the way to Arco in one day, but you can't make it from Pocatello to Downey in one day? That's your own fault. Is that what you're trying to say?
yes. And if you have problems figuring that out, then just go home.
Yeah, we had a team a couple of years ago, and I actually like these guys. They're locals, and I know them, and I don't have a problem with these guys at all, except they don't really ride motorcycles. They're more quad and side-by-side guys, and they got all wound up about this thing, and they spent the better part of a year talking about how they could easily ride all the way. They could combine day one and day two together if it wasn't against the rules. And when people would say, well, you're not serious about that, or, oh, yeah, we're absolutely serious. We ride these trails all the time. And I believe that day they got to Downey about midnight on day one, and Downey's about a third of the way through. So it just didn't quite work out. And those guys are pissed off. That was the thing about it. After us telling them for a year what you want to do, we hope you're joking because it won't work. Then they ran away all mad. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Don't be an asshat.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And, there's other guys that, Don and I came into this. We've never raced. We've never been like the circuit guys and whatever. We've been mountain men our entire lives. And, that's what we do. And we're in competition with ourselves. And we thought this was an opportunity of a lifetime. And nobody knew who we were. Martin had no clue who we were when we showed up. And that's what was fun, we pulled it off, we did it. We're not Graham Jarvis or anything, but Jimmy Lewis, but we get on our bikes and we ride and we do what we say we're going to do. And, grit and determination get you to the end if everything else lays down in your favor. And you get to go through some really cool places along the way, seeing all these different people.
You guys actually have a better skill set than most racers do. Again, racers tend not to have the best record of success in the world, and they also tend to be the most pissy when things don't work out. It's way better to be a mountain man, as you described yourself, just a general outdoors person, I think, because then you have the skill set. You guys knew what to do. You knew you weren't going to die. As soon as you got up to where all those guys were camped out, there's a fire there. You did the smart thing. You took your clothes off. I mean, no telling how many of those guys were in jail for something that might have made that attractive. But nonetheless, you understood it was smart to take your clothes off, dry out, dry yourself, dry your clothes. You did all the right things. You have no idea how many people I deal with that would have no idea that that was the right thing to do. And if you told them, they would argue with you about it. They'd say, oh, no, that's not right. Just like this Gore-Tex argument that I have with people all the time. I try to tell them, look, Gore-Tex is okay for some things, but it's maybe not okay for this. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just, it just goes on and on. You guys had a better skill set, and your mountaineering, you weren't really into it to the degree you are now back in those days, but the fact that you have evolved into that sport tells me something, that move is in your psyche somewhere. That's let's go out and figure out this environment and figure out how to succeed in this environment, because that's what you do in mountaineering.
Yeah, if you're not scared to death at a certain point, it's not going to change it, right? So you just got to push through, be smart, and that's what makes this adventure fun. Is it's not like you get a big trophy when you're all done and you're on the news and everybody thinks you're amazing, unless you're Tony and Steven and. But they're great guys. They're more famous than any of us combined. But anyway. You're not going to get all that glory, and that's not why we're doing it. If you're doing it, maybe some people do it for that. I don't know, but it's really cool to test your ability, and not only that, you got to know how to work on your bike when you're out there. The stuff's going to happen, how to get over a situation, logs down, bridges out, whatever it is, to figure it out, how to get through it. And that's what makes it fun. And I did it with my brother. So that whole part about pissy and money, we just did that between ourselves. We didn't include doing that. I wish Don could have been here. He went camping up near Wallace and Avery this weekend. I didn't go, but he wishes he could have been on here. And we love each other. Yeah. But yeah, we wanted to kill each other a few times, but that's part of the deal.
By the way, everybody that's ever ridden Stevens Peak at sunset, the two sandbagging rascals that talked me into putting Stevens Peak back on the tour, one of them is sitting right in front of you, so you can take it out with him. I went up there and rode that stuff about 10 years ago. It was all brushy, and that quad trail that takes you there was nasty. It had ruts in it that were like up to my handlebars.
Yeah.
I remember riding that stuff and saying, we can't put that. And also at that time, that was at the end of a day that actually started in Lowell. It didn't start at Locksha. We used to go all the way from Lowell to Wallace in a day. So it was already a 300-mile day. And I said, if you put that stuff on there at the end of the day, people will come and shoot you, and you will deserve it. So I talked to these guys, and they go, oh, no, man, we went up there and rode that stuff, and it's all been done. It's great. We'll go up and saw it ourselves. It's awesome. You got to put it back on. So when you guys are up there riding that Stevens Peak stuff at the end of the day, and you're looking off over your left shoulder, I don't know how far down it is, but it's a long damn way, and that trail isn't that wide. It's not hard, but it's like, holy cow, is there some exposure here?
Yeah, there is.
There's the guy over here whose initials are AS. That's all I'm going to do to identify him. He's one of the guys that talked me into it. Another guy named DS had something to do with it, too.
Yeah, he did. He had more to do with it than I did.
All right, brother. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody's time that does this, and especially yours. The great pleasure of the Tour of Idaho is I get to know guys like this, and we become friends. This fraternity is tight, and well, it's a fraternity and a sorority now, right? Because Carrie's part of it.
Yeah, right.
It's a tight group of individuals, and I assure you that if you go out there and you get into trouble, we're watching, and somebody is going to come help you out. It'll be all right. Aaron, thank you.
All right, I'm coming down to Bear Lake in June. I'm going to try to come see you.
Hey, I'll be here. I will. Yeah, let me know in advance, and we'll get together and we'll have some fun.
Let's do it.
Take care, brother.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. So there you go. Again, I bring people on like this for a reason, and that's because not just because they're my friends, and I suspect that they're going to say, by the way, we didn't talk about this stuff before the show. I chat them up. We were talking about climbing the whole time that we were waiting to come on here, comparing notes and some climbs and stuff, which is why I started with our careers are kind of going in opposite directions, because he went from biking into climbing and I went from climbing into biking. But yeah, they can say whatever they want. I bring them on because I know that most of these people went through the same things that you guys are going to go through. And I think it's useful for you to hear it from somebody other than me. Hear from these other people that were successful, that went out there and got things done. Hey, Dwayne, I see you out there, buddy. Thank you very much for once again being one of the guys. Dwayne has never done the Tour of Idaho, but he's a member of our group for years. And he was another guy that was offered to load up a truck that night. We had to go get, we thought we were going to have to go get Jeff Jensen, who I'm going to bring him on, I think, in another week or so. I think his story is another good one because just like Aaron and Don's story, it is a story of perseverance and of somebody who, in a really tough spot, managed to screw together enough wherewithal and determination to pull it out. And I was amazed that he was able to do what he could do. And I think it's better to hear that from him himself. So let's get into what day 8's all about. I want to try to get through that. I want to try to get through all this stuff in an hour if I can. Let me get my notes up here. Come on now. Well, while the other computer's loading, you start at Lowell, and let me see here. Come on. There we go. All right, now we've got it. So you start at Lowell, and this is another day. You want to make sure that on day 8, you get a really early start. Now, there is no gas at Lowell. We went over that last week. I've called both places up there. They're not, and they don't want to do anything like, go to Kuski and get gas for you or anything like that. And as I told you before, since they've indicated to me anyway, they would prefer to stay out of that business. You cannot prearrange for any gas at Lowell. So if you ask the people at Three Rivers to go get you gas and say, look, I'll pay you $50 to do it, that's a violation of Challenge Point rules, because we've already said you got to carry gas from Elk City, or you've got to ride into Koosky and get gas. We talked about that last week. I don't recommend riding into Koosky. It's 25 miles each way. It's slab the whole way. It's kind of a dangerous road. At the very least, you're going to cook your tires. At the very worst, you're going to end up as a hood ornament on a Peterbilt somewhere. It's a good road to stay off of if you can. So get your gas in Elk City. Buy a couple of extra gas cans there if you need to. The riding from Elk City to Lowell is easy. Strap them on your bike. Wear them bandolier style if you have to. But just carry as much gas as you can to Lowell. Now, if you can borrow or beg some gas, that's fine. You run to somebody in a campground there and say, hey, can I give you $5 for some gas? And they say yes, that's serendipity, and that's perfectly okay. You just can't prearrange it, because if you're prearranging it, you're doing something that conceivably other teams couldn't do that are following the rules. So you need to get out of Lowell pretty early in the morning. You ride it's not even a mile down the road before you hit Peak King Creek. And there's two trails there. I think, let me go look at the map here. I think that soloists go one way and everybody else goes another, but let me check. Yep, soloists go up the Peak King Ridge Trail. And it's a nice trail. It's a quad trail. Everybody else takes the Peak King Creek Trail, and the Peak King Creek Trail will introduce you right away to what is coming that day, which is lots of overgrowth. There's dense overgrowth down there. The stuff doesn't get brushed very often. And every time I do these trails, I'm amazed at the distance that I ride without even being able to see my front fender. It's like there's a track there. You can feel it more than you can see it. And, it kind of just keeps going straight. It's not incredibly difficult to follow except in a couple of spots. But Peak King Creek gives you a very early preview of what you're into for the day. So you're right. Most of Peak King Creek, except for the fact it's overgrown, is not that difficult. There's some switchbacks, and it climbs pretty steeply for a ways. There's a little bit of side hilling, but nothing serious. And you're going to come out up near Higgins Hump. Both the trails, the solo variation, which is much easier, much quicker, and the 2 and 3 person variation merge up near 8DXYZ4, it looks like. Is that right? 2, 3, yep. And from there, you ride on up to a lookout. You ride up to Mex Mountain, and then you ride out to a lookout. Let me see if I can find this. Nope, the lookout is before Mex Mountain. I'm sorry. It's the Waldy Lookout. Now, there's usually somebody in that lookout. So if there's somebody in the lookout, if you get there super early in the morning, sometimes there's nobody there and it's locked. But if there's somebody in that lookout, you're really supposed to climb the lookout and take your challenge point picture from up at the lookout. They're usually pretty happy to have you. But if it's early in the morning and it's locked, don't worry about any of that. But in all these lookouts, as I've said before, if you think you can get up in there, if half the steps aren't missing, if it looks like, the steps are functioning, you're not going to die going up. And especially if there's somebody up in there, as long as there's not a sign that says, no trespassing or don't go up in here, the challenge point is in the lookout itself. So the Waldy Lookout's a pretty good one. Normally, they know what you're doing, and they're usually pretty happy to talk with you, and it's a lot of fun. So there's a short out and back to that lookout, which is kind of cool because you can see a lot of good stuff from up there. Your phone will work there. Then you ride up to Mex Mountain, and the trail at Mex Mountain starts heading due east to Frenchman's Butte. And there's just a nice long out and back along a series of roads, Jeep type trails, but they're pretty fast. They take you out to Fish Butte. There's a challenge point out at Fish Butte. You just go up, and there used to be a lookout up there, but it's gone. You come down off Fish Butte, and you're going to ride the Fish Butte Trail. And the Fish Butte Trail is one of the coolest trails on the tour, but man, has it got some side hill exposure. Now, again, this is one of these trails that's technically extremely easy, but it's got some pretty ferocious side hill exposure. And that trail is one of the trails on the tour. Interestingly, I think that trail actually has some genuine hazard to it. I'm not the kind of guy, just because of my experience, being up high doesn't bother me at all. It's what happens if something goes wrong that makes me think. The problem with that trail is there's a couple places where you're riding across these slabs that are made out of decaying granite. It's Idaho batholith territory up there. So you're riding on top of this great big piece of exposed granite, and weathering's gotten to it. So the granite's kind of loose. It's really slick. It's not what most people think of when they think of granite. That's why the switchbacks at Ant Hill are so bad, decomposed granite. So you ride across these slabs, and they kind of curl down like this, and they get steeper the farther down you go. And in some places, you're riding across these bare granite slabs. The trail just kind of goes out to these slabs, and you got to ride around and up. And there's a couple spots where you have to do that. Were you to fall off there, the problem that you would run into is that granite's really slick, and the farther down you go, the steeper it gets. So it's like an off-camber turn on a racetrack. You're not going to stop sliding until you leave the racetrack and hit flat ground. Well, here, flat ground's about 900 feet down in that creek. So there are a couple of spots on that trail. They're not even the spots that look the scariest, but there's a couple places when you're riding across those granite slabs, you want to make sure you exercise some caution there. I would not, if I were you, blow crossing those granite slabs. The other thing you should be aware of is you were in the heart of large predator territory in this area. The Team Hillbilly has an excellent video from their tour of Idaho last year that shows a mountain lion standing on the trail about 20 feet in front of him. It was really close, and it looked to me like he wasn't in any hurry to get out of the way. He stood there and stared him down, and I think that he was thinking about whether or not he had a meal. Every large predator that you should be worried about that might consider you a meal is found in the woods along these trails on day 8. On day 7, basically once you get on the northern half of the tour, once you enter the Pacific time zone, you should assume that every noise that you hear out there in the brush somewhere could be a grizzly or could be a mountain lion. Or Wolverine or something else that you don't want to mess with, or a great big old pissed off moose, which might do more damage than all of the above. So you ride down this Butte trail, you're going to get to the bottom, and that's where you have to make this decision about whether or not you want to do the challenge section. If you're a strong 2-person team or a 3-person team, that challenge section is very doable just because there is some side hill exposure, but there's only one section that's about 100 yards long that's technical and it's hard. And what everybody does that gets up there that's got more than one rider is you just help each other. We call the section the Erzberg boulders. Nobody rides that. Everybody gets up there, or at least nobody rides it that on a tour of Idaho bike that's never seen it before. What everybody does is they push, pull, they get a running start, get as far up as they can, then people help bucket brigade bikes up over all the rocks. And if you've got several members on your team, that's accessible to you. But watch the Jimmy Lewis video. If you get up there and you are by yourself, Jimmy chucked his bike off there, and it was nearly a catastrophe. So I don't know what else to tell you. You know, one of the strongest riders I know had some trouble with that section. And when I talked to him later that day, he was really in my grill about it. He thought I had under-described how serious that particular trail was. And, I probably had. So I made up for that mistake by telling everybody, you got to take that Sherman Creek Trail pretty seriously if you decide to do good. You get a strong 2-person team, no worries. 3-person team, no worries. If you're a soloist, Jimmy had some trouble with that trail. That's all I'm going to say. There are a few soloists that have done it, but I've talked to all of them after it was over, and they said, man, that trail was for real. It does save you a lot of time, but I don't know about how much effort it saves you, especially if you're on a solo team. I don't know that it saves you any effort because driving your bike over those rocks, which is Jeff just pointed out, there's a waterfall that comes down there, so those rocks are slick as hell. By the time you grunt and groan, do everything you got to do to drag your bike over those rocks, you're going to be worn out. And plus, there's side hill exposure in several places along that trail. So the whole thing is a little nerve-wracking aside from the technical part. If you're a soloist, I recommend you ride up Fish Creek and take the solo option, which is to head back down the way you came, back out across Middle Butte and all that, and just ride up the Lolo motorway. Fish Creek will give you all the exposure you want. There's some pretty good little side hill exposure in Fish Creek because the trail keeps coming up out of the creek and it goes up through rocks and stuff. And Some of that stuff you got to hit with some speed. It's really difficult to sort of Fred Flintstone your way up some of that stuff. I always thought Fish Creek was kind of technical, and it's got some stuff you have to pay attention to. If you are on a 2 or 3 person team, you got to do Ant Hill. And the reason I don't want soloists going up Ant Hill is Ant Hill is god awful. It's got a series of about 6 or 8 switchbacks, and their ruts in them are up to your handlebars. They're just awful. This fall, I think Jensen and some of us are going to go up there on and try to work that out. We'll go up and we'll talk to the Forest Service maybe about a reroute, or at the very least, we'll try to work on those switchbacks and see if we can't get them fixed. What a lot of people do is they just give up and they get out their rescue kits, and you can easily winch your bike up all those switchbacks. In like 2 or 3 pulls, you can have your bikes up, and that's probably less effort than trying to push, pull, and tug them up through all those switchbacks. So I think that Ant Hill is certainly no easier in terms of physical effort for teams, but you're not going to fall off Ant Hill and lose your bike way down in Sherman Creek like you might on Sherman Creek. You could take quite a tumble there, and it might be difficult to extract your bike. On Ant Hill, it's just a matter of effort. So one way you go, there's effort plus some exposure that's for real, and the other way, it's just effort, but there's not a lot of exposure. 6 of one, half dozen the other. Soloists, since you're by yourself, we let you out of that. There's a much easier route. And by the way, soloists, don't feel bad about taking that route out, because both ways are someplace you're talking to a guy that rides solo all the time. And I've done both these trails solo, and Sherman Creek and Ant Hill were 2 of the only times I've ever felt like, you really should not be here by yourself. And I ride by myself all the time. At any rate, either of those trails is going to take you up to the Lolo motorway. And the only difference is, how quickly you get there. If you take Sherman Creek, you're considerably further to the east. You come out a little bit to the east of Sherman Peak than if you take Ant Hill or if you take the solo route around. By the way, the Lolo motorway is another one of these things that is one of the most hazardous things on the tour. You should assume every time you come around a corner on the Lolo motorway that from the opposite direction, there is somebody in a Jeep or a side-by-side or a KLR 650 loaded with shit doing 100 miles an hour that knows you, hates your guts, and knows that you're on the other side of that corner. Every time I ride that road, I get run off by somebody in a full uncontrolled 2 or 4-wheel drift coming around one of those corners. That's a big adventure rider kind of a road, and all these guys get on there and they want to brag about how they set the record from one end to the other. So just be careful when you're up on the Lolo motorway, especially if you get there on a weekend. There's a challenge point out on, I forget what the name of that butte is, but along the motorway up near Bald Mountain, there's a lookout out there, and there's another challenge point. It's at 8D XYZ 31, it looks like. Then you ride a little bit further to the east, and you're going to come up on Indian Grave Peak, and shortly after that, 12 Mile Saddle. Now, you get into this area, and there's a really, really nice single-track trail. It's called the Windy Ridge Trail. And the Windy Ridge Trail is a lot of people's favorite single-track trail. You go out there, you ride this trail. It's a wonderful trail. There used to be a little bit of gnarl about halfway out, but somebody went in a couple years ago and fixed all that. There was a place, there's one little side hilly place along that trail, and a big boulder rolled down, and you couldn't really fit a bike on the inside of the boulder, so you had to go around the outside of the boulder on this really tricky side hill. All that stuff was gone the last time I was there a couple years ago. So that Windy Ridge Trail is an awesome trail. It's like a 3rd, 4th gear single track. You can be doing 20 miles an hour safely buzzing down this trail. If you are a soloist, you get out to Monroe Butte, and there's a single track trail at ADXYZ 34, it looks like. You have the option, if you're a soloist, to take a shortcut that will get you into Laksha Lodge hours earlier than going on out across Windy Bill. if I were a soloist, I'd think hard about taking that, especially if I got there very late in the day. There's nothing technically that challenging from there on out. Navigation is a little bit of an issue, but Windy Bill and Scurvy Mountain and all that are not technical. It's just a long way, at least not in the direction you're going. They're not technical. It'd be harder coming back the opposite way. So it's all good. But then when you get to Scurvy Mountain, as Aaron just said, you get on this road, the Toboggan Ridge Road, and you think, well, it looks to me like I'm going to be at Loxia Lodge in just a few minutes. It's like 90 minutes minimum. You got to be hauling ass to make it to Loxia Lodge in 90 minutes once you hit the road, because it's a long way. It's 50 miles, 50 miles plus. So if you're a soloist, you can take that if you want. But if you do take this shortcut on day 8, on day 9, you have to ride another trail. So there's a day 9 trail that you don't have to ride if you ride the whole day 8 trail. So if you ride up around, if you ride out Windy Bill, you ride up to Scurvy Lookout and all that stuff on day 8, on day 9, you get to skip another trail that's technically a more difficult trail, in my opinion. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but soloist, you have an option in there. So it's one or the other. For everybody else, you are going to ride out. And if you're looking at the map that I am right now, the 100K map, you ride out Windy Ridge, and right about where the W is in Windy Ridge, just a little bit north of Monroe Butte, on most maps, it shows a trail that heads off towards Lookout Peak. That trail does not exist. And in the 15 years I've been going up there, that trail has never existed. It's not there. This is another one of those kind of places where all of the maps are wrong. Every year, somebody emails me and they say, why is it that waypoint that I have labeled as, 35, they go, why is that waypoint way out in the middle of nowhere? I'm looking at the map and it says the trail's not there. The trail's there. The maps are all wrong in this area. And many Tour of Idahos have ended at this place because people get to where their maps tell them there's a trail that's going off to sort of the northeast. And because the map says there's a trail there, a lot of people make the same mistake. So yeah, there's some tire tracks. And you can see where people have sawed a few logs. It doesn't look very promising, but obviously people have gone through there before because the map says there's a trail there. So you get out there, what happens is you ride, and after the first quarter of a mile, it starts becoming harder to find, and then you start hopping logs because other people gave up before you did. And before you know it, you're down off of a hill back in there. You've hopped about a half a dozen logs, and you're really screwed because you're not going to get through that way. I don't think there was ever a trail there. I think that's always been a mistake. Or if it was, it's close to, but not exactly where the map says it should be. So what you want to do is make sure you find your way down to that waypoint, XYZ 35. I assure you that waypoint is right where it needs to be. It happens to be right at the intersection of a couple of trails. Now, once you get down to that waypoint, there's a trail that goes up to Cook Mountain. We used to go that way. You don't want that. But there's several trails that go kind of in the direction that you want up towards Lookout Peak. And a lot of people miss the right trail because, again, there's some old trails back in there and they all go and they peter out. If you start riding down a trail and it does not look promising, stop, go back, find the trail that looks like it's the most well-trafficked, because there's 2 or 3 little trails in there that kind of go and just peter off. But at that intersection, if you're sitting at that intersection, there's a sign there that points straight at the trail you want, the Windy Bill Trail. Go right where that arrow's pointing and you'll be fine. But a little bit before that sign and a little bit after that sign, there's a couple of little trails that go off that look really good for a while, but you'll find out you're in the wrong place because they're not sawed. The real trail gets sawed because it's part of the Continental Divide Trail, so it sees some traffic. The Erstas trails do not. So you're going to ride for a ways, and it's kind of interesting because you're down in a fairly deep valley, and you start side hilling up out of this valley. And the side hilling is not really very onerous, except there's a couple places where you go back in, you cross these creeks, you make like this really big sharp turn where a creek's coming down the hillside. You got to be careful in those spots because, again, this trail is really overgrown. And if you dab a foot off to the left side, there's a really good chance there's no trail there. You just can't see it down in the bushes. Don't be dabbing off to the left when you're going up some of those side hills. The photograph that I put up, which is taken by my buddy Josh Commons, shows a bike off a side hill in that area there. I myself have launched a bike off a side hill in there a couple of times. And they can end up a long way down there. There's all kinds of brush and stuff, rocks hidden in the brush, these brambles and briars and stuff. And there's bears and mountain lions and everything in the world watching you down there trying to tug your bike out of that. So I might have my 10 millimeter and my bear spray on my hip. So be careful getting up to the top of Windy Bill. Once you get on top, there's lots of trails up there that go off in different directions. I tried to put the waypoints in places where they'll guide you, but you're going to want to do some extensive map study because there are a lot of people that take the trails that go down into the Clearwater, and you want to avoid those. You're going to continue to go east out across Windy Bill down something called Switchback Hill. By the way, there are some trails back in there that people ride that are illegal trails. The trail that goes out to Junction Mountain, for instance, I'm pretty sure that is an illegal trail. Is that the one? Yeah, Junction Mountain, I think, is not moto legal anymore. There's two trails out there that parallel each other. One of them's moto legal, one of them's not. So if you get lost back in there, you might even end up on a trail that you're not supposed to be on. So you ride out to Switchback Hill. The only difficulty once you get up on top is finding your way because it's a little brushy and it goes around logs and stuff, and you might have to get off your bike every once in a while and look around a little bit. You ride down off of Switchback Hill, and once you get to the bottom of Switchback Hill, the very bottom of Switchback Hill, you come out in this meadow, and it's beautiful. I mean, you've been riding through trees and stuff, and all of a sudden you're in this great big alpine meadow, and it's really pretty. But the trail disappears, and it's a little bit difficult to kind of figure out what to do there because you go across this meadow, it's got a lot of high grass. The trail is almost exactly on the opposite side of the meadow. And if you can't find your way through there, just go around the rider's right. Just stick to the sort of the right side of the meadow and go around. And when you get to the other side, you'll see it. You can go either way. You can go to the left or the right around the meadow, but it's a lot shorter to go around the meadow to the rider's right. Sort of go counterclockwise around that meadow. And if you do that, you'll eventually see where the trail on the other side goes into the woods. I haven't been there for a couple years, but everybody tells me, yeah, that's still a problem. And when we look at teams' progress, I typically see teams in that meadow for a while trying to find their way out the other side of it. And I've seen people ride across it a couple of times before they finally found out where the exit is. For a while, the trail on the other side it was god-awful. It was just completely terrible. It has gotten better because a few years ago, they actually went up and did some real maintenance on it. So it's not as bad as it used to be. But getting up Switchback Hill is still kind of interesting. It's one of these places where there's some switchbacks, they're rutted, and when it's overgrown, it's really difficult to see exactly where you should be placing your wheel. So your bike's going to get hot probably going up to Scurvy Mountain. You get up to the top, near the top of Scurvy Mountain, there's an outback to the lookout. When you get up to that lookout, that is a lookout that the Forest Service rents out to private parties now. So be sure you're polite when you go up there. That there is a challenge point up there, and you need to take a picture. And if there's nobody there, the door's probably locked these days since they rent it out. I don't know. If the door's open, go on inside, but just make sure that you're not intruding. If there's somebody else in there, they have rented that, so you don't want to bother them. You don't have to go inside that one. You can just take the photo up there anywhere you want. It's probably going to be dark anyway, so it really doesn't matter that much. But that's one that you don't have to go into. If it's empty, if it's not occupied and you can get in, go ahead, but don't feel compelled to go in there. You ride back down, you take a quad trail that goes steeply down to the road. You take that Toboggan Ridge Road all the way into Loksha Lodge. Now, there are a bunch of ways. There's only one way to get across Toboggan Ridge. But once you start getting close, once you intersect the Lolo motorway again, up around, let's see, it's before Powell Junction. It's up there around, where is it? ATXYZ 47. Once you get into that area, there are actually several ways to Powell Ranger Station and Loksha Lodge. You can look on the maps, and you can see there's a whole maze of logging roads in there. The one that I have marked is longer than some of the other ways, but I have never seen it closed. The rest of those are frequently closed for one reason or another. It floods, something's washed out. But the way that I take you follows the sort of eastern terminus of the Lolo motorway, and it's well enough used that they don't close that unless there's some dire need. So going through Powell Junction, that it's almost guaranteed to be open. I've never, ever seen that road closed. Never. And it'll get you there. But that's another one of those kind of places that, if you found it, if that road were closed, or if for some reason you got lost and you took one of those other roads down to Loxia Lodge and Powell Ranger Station, by this point, unless you had been a real screw up many times before, I probably wouldn't say much about that, and I don't think anybody else would either, because there's a lot of ways down there. But the way I've shown you, albeit longer, is probably the way you want to go. Now, Loxia Lodge is one of those kind of places that it's a little bit difficult to get accommodations. And if you haven't gotten them yet, you're not going to get them probably, unless somebody cancels. It depends on who you talk to about whether or not you can get put on a waiting list. The last time I was there, I didn't have a reservation. I just found they got a really nice bathroom there. I just slept on the ground. I always carry an emergency bivy bag with me, and, made myself a nice pillow out of some twigs and leaves and stuff, and just slept on the ground. The meal there was good enough to justify that. But the rooms there are wonderful. The lodge there is great. You're close to the end of the tour. In my estimation, if you make it through day 8, you probably got the tour of Idaho in the bag, barring some extremely bad luck. So let me go back and see if I can find some questions that pertain directly to day 8 here. Let's see. Sean Smith, as a soloist, if we do Windy Ridge, can we pick up the bonus CP the next day doing scurvy? That's what you're supposed to do. If you read the description, Sean, carefully enough, it tells you that if you skip scurvy in day 8, you're required to do it on day 9. And there's even, if you look at the day 9 map, that's even on there, how you do the out and back to scurvy lookout. So, yeah, that's perfectly acceptable. The only thing is, on day 9, there's a trail called the Rock Garden Trail. And that also has put an end to a couple of tours of Idaho. If you're on a team, it doesn't matter, because you can push, pull, team drag your bikes up over the switchbacks. And the Rock Garden itself has got some adventure to it. And there's even a little bit of side hilling in there in some places you wish there weren't. But it's short. Once you're done with that, pretty much the rest of the day goes much easier. But me personally, I would rather do the work on day 8. I would rather just go out and ride that long trail, because I know I can make it. I know it's just going to take a longer amount of time. But you may get bad weather. It may snow on you. Something may happen. So if you get there and it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon and you're a soloist on day 8, take Martin Creek. Take the shortcut. Remember, on the Tour of Idaho, live to fight another day. Doesn't matter what happens on day 9 if you can't get through day 8. So if you're a soloist, take advantage of that shortcut. Same thing if you're a team. If I don't know if I can get up Sherman Creek or not, well, then go do the other way, because I know you can get up that. If you made it this far, I know you can get up Ant Hill. It's just going to be a grunt. How about the drive to Lolo Hot Springs from there? There's some people that said they were going to do it. I don't know that anybody that ever finished the tour did that. Movie stars might have. It's a long way. I mean, you got to go up over that pass, and it doesn't sound like it's very far. It sounds like it's 45 or 50 miles, and you're thinking, well, how hard can that be? At the end of a long day like that, when you might be really cold and really wet, I wouldn't do that. If it were me, I'd rather sleep on the ground right there and go into the men's room to stay warm when I needed to. The Challenge Point Fish Butte Trail, the rock picture you have, that's what we are looking for. Mark, that is exactly right. That's taken right where the Challenge Point is. That also is, by the way, in that area where there's those slick granite slabs that I would watch for. And that's about a mile down the trail from where I believe Jeff encountered a mountain lion that was not gentlemanly enough to move out of the way in a hurry. All right, let's see what else we got. Somebody asked a question about if you can watch all these, and that question was answered. Yeah, all of these. PBR Monday is archived on the motorcyclejazz.com YouTube page, but it's also here. If you want to search through the Facebook feed, you can find all these on Facebook too. Facebook puts them up and they're there permanently. So there is a live event, but the recordings stay. I think they're a little bit easier to search on the YouTube page. And I haven't done this in a couple weeks, but I normally put them in a special folder. But even if they're not all in that folder, they're all there just as general uploaded videos, so you can see them all. All right. Let's see what else we got here. By the way, day 1 trails are amazing. Yeah, I saw that you rode some of that stuff. Good for you. It's different when you're on a fully loaded tour bike and you do it all in one day. That's the only caution I'll give you. A lot of people come down, they ride parts of the day one trail. And the good lesson of pre-riding a trail is if you do it exactly the way you're going to do it when you do the tour. So if you're a soloist, you do it by yourself, you do it with a fully loaded tour bike, then you get the good lesson. If you don't do that, and I'm not saying anybody that doesn't do that is doing something wrong, because you do gain some valuable information even just doing it. But the only thing you want to be really careful of is if you come in on a lightly loaded bike, or you come in with a bunch of people and you're going to be doing it solo, or you don't come with the people that you're going to be coming with when you do it, just be super careful about not underestimating the increased difficulty that you're going to encounter when you're there for real. It's different. And it's also going to be way hotter in July and August than it is right now. You know, this weekend was pretty nice. Today was a little hot, but when you're out there in July, last year we had people boiling gas out of their tanks on day one. So just make sure that you get the right message out of your pre-run. Paul Peterson, snowpack this year is terrible. Almost every place in Idaho, except up in the Island Park area, they had kind of a normal snowpack. But every place else, it's really low. This year, you'll be able to get through some of those passes, I think, pretty early. And that doesn't bode well for fire season, so I'm a little worried about that. What else? One thing I'm considering doing this year, and I haven't thought this through yet, but I'll know before the first team sets out. This comes up every year. It is perfectly legitimate, reasonable, and I even encourage in some places for you to pre-ride these trails. And I see a lot of people out doing that. Makes nothing but good sense. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Every time somebody says, well, which trails should I pre-ride? I pre-ride day 1 and day 8 because those are the 2 hardest days. And if you can do those, then, you know, if you can't do one of those, you can't do the Tour of Idaho. If you can do one of those, well, then there's a pretty good expectation that you should be able to succeed. You know, we've had people that have showed up that have tried to do day 1 3 or 4 times, and we're still determined that, you know, if your last failure was in June and you're starting out to do the Tour of Idaho in July, you're not going to improve enough in 3 or 4 weeks to magically be able to get through day 1 on a fully loaded tour bike. That's why we tell you to do it. But one thing that's come up in the past, and one thing that I am considering doing this year, is I might give a bonus point to any team that shows up that has not ridden any of the trails. So let's say you're coming here from Europe, or you're coming here from the East Coast somewhere. Your dirt bike has never touched Idaho soil. You've never ridden any of these trails. You might end up getting a bonus point. So there you go. I'm not going to commit to that yet, but it's something that I have occasionally done in the past. It's kind of gone year by year. I look at the challenge point schedule, and that's sometimes one that I build in for teams that haven't done any of it. That should not discourage you, by the way, from pre-riding some of this stuff. I wouldn't avoid pre-riding just because I thought I might pick up an extra point. But if you haven't ridden any of it, you know, you've never been here before, that's another layer of difficulty. And me personally, I think that's worth rewarding. So I'll give that a little bit more thought, and I'll talk to the members of the posse, and we'll see what comes up with that. But in the past, everybody's always been fairly copacetic with that. They feel as I do that if you're coming here from some completely different environment, it's much, much, much more difficult. All right. I think that's about it. So next week, same bat time, same bat channel, we'll be talking about day 9 and day 10. I will absolutely run those 2 together next week because we're getting down to nut cutting time here right now. Sorry, Carrie. And we got to get to the getting. There's some topics that we have to cover before the first teams take off. And I want to spend a full hour, at least 1 full hour on navigation. I'm going to start doing trail updates. When I get information about trails this year, I'll let you know what's open, what's closed, what you might have to watch for. And get yourselves in that calendar sometime in the next 24 hours because tomorrow I'm going to ride. I'm going to go out to the desert, work on some of those routes. But Wednesday, I'm going to start building that calendar. So let's see if we can get it all populated and good to go. Once again, thank you very much for wasting an entire hour of your life with me. Please thank our guest, Aaron Stafford, who was good enough to give up some holiday time. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all of you watching, especially Tour of Idaho vets. Carrie Barton's on here every week. Those of you who don't know, Carrie Barton was the first female finisher for the tour. Hopefully, I can talk her into fielding an all-female team sometime in the next few years, because as I told you all last week, that's one of my goals before I get out of this. Last week, I told everybody I'm not going to be doing this when I'm 70. I got at the outside 5 more years doing this. And then it's either going to be somebody else's headache or it's going to be kaput, one way or the other. But in that time, I asked everybody last week, and I'll put it out there again, I'd really like to see an all-female team, a strong all-female team show up to do this. That's extremely important to me, because I think motorcycling is a sport that is accessible to everyone. And I feel the same way about, I'd like to see, I'm waiting for this team from Europe. I'm not going to quit the tour until these European guys show up. I know that Thomas is watching tonight. I really hope that these guys can get over here in the next year or so, because I want to see them get through it. Also, next time I go to the Alps, I'd like to have some people to show me around. And I really would like to see, again, I look at motorcycling, and I look at big adventures like this, and I see the brotherhood, Aaron, my friend that I met tonight, all you wonderful people I've met through the tour, people who will drop what they are doing in a heartbeat and go help out another tour member. I'd like to see this fraternity be a little bit more diverse. I'd like to see more women in it. I'd like to see people of color, Native Americans. And again, I'm not one of these bleeding heart liberals, but I'm also the kind of guy that thinks my life has been made better by all the adventures I've had. And I'd like to open that up. So let's go out and let's beat the streets, and let's find some people, let's get a little bit of diversity in this thing. Let's get an all-woman team. Let's go get a team of brothers to go do this whole thing. See what we can do. All right, that's it. I've wasted enough of your time. I will see you all next week. Be seeing you.